I'm Jewish. My family follows Judaism. We've made numerous family visits to Israel.
Good. Jesus. When you see something like this, a journalist would be kidnapped who is trying to understand this new world and trying to make sense of it, and that he could be slaughtered like an animal and his head held up as a prize, as a trophy, and that somewhere in the world people watch that and celebrate, and laugh, and feel somehow empowered or victorious. It's just tragic, and I just hope that whatever we do in some way continues his search for truth and his belief that somehow you could make a difference and ultimately bring people together.
We thought he disappeared, but he didn't. Call it anti-Semitism, a term coined at the end of the 19th century, or simply Jew hatred. It is the oldest collective bigotry in recorded history. It is no longer political, social, or religious, or ethnic. It is existential. It is metaphysical. The anti-Semite doesn't know me, but he hates me. Actually, he hated me even before I was born. Help us fight it. Help us disarm it. For hatred is dangerous. Hatred is contagious. He or she who hates Jews hates all minorities, all those who are different. He or she who hates Jews will end up hating everybody, and then himself.
Why those people died has everything to do with it. They weren't killed by Islamic fundamentalists.
This is not a political stage here,
Sure
man.
it is. Look at the size of that flag. Of course this is a political stage. Get the fuck out of here. Fuck off me. People like you fucking disgust me. You fucking disgust me. You fucking have no idea. The fuck out of here.
Even the third anniversary memorial at Ground Zero didn't silence the conspiracy theorists and provocateurs. People are going to speculate about what happened and why for years. The Protocols thesis that the Jews clandestinely mastermind world events continues to persist despite all the evidence.
Jeff Levine.
John Dennis Levi.
Alicia Karen Levin.
Neil David Levin.
Look, America changed on September 11th, and some of the cost of that change was those human lives.
At the New York City Medical Examiner's office, I met with the man in charge of identifying the World Trade Center remains. To my surprise, it turned out he was also the cantor at the temple where my children were bar mitzvahed.
They're both, in a sense, service roles. Here as a cantor, I serve my congregation at the medical examiner's office. We serve the community at large. We have a number of refrigerators like this, carefully inventoried. We know exactly what's here from every one of the unidentified remains so that we can keep working on them. Nothing brings home what's happened like walking into a mortuary area and seeing 8 tables filled with bits and pieces of what used to be human beings. I mean, you can't hold fragments of a femur bone in your hand and seeing them burnt on one end and shredded on the other end and not realize the catastrophe that's happened here. And you can't turn over a burnt, still smoking piece of clothing with some charred tissue inside of it and a piece of belt on it and a beeper on it, and the beeper is somehow miraculously intact enough to still be working. And, you can't realize that this used to be somebody. And then, we hear this nonsense about the Jews did it. No Jews died. You've got to be filled with complete blind hatred and an inability or an unwillingness to see the actual truth. Jews were killed in September 11th. Hundreds and hundreds of Jews were killed. I spoke to their families. I went to memorial services, and I went to the grave of a very good friend of mine who was the assistant cantor of our synagogue, Jeffrey Weiner, who was a Jew and who was killed.
Jeff was a manager of a risk management group on the 96th floor of the World Trade Center. It was during our first date, actually, that I realized that he was Jewish. I didn't know a lot of Jewish people growing up, and he made some kind of comment. I don't even remember what it was, but he was just like, if that ever happened, my mother, that's it, the Messiah has come. And I was like, the Messiah has come. I'm like, oh, he's Jewish. I remember that before I converted, I asked the rabbi, I said, if something like the Holocaust were to ever happen here, if I didn't convert, would my children be safe? And he said, no, probably not. In Germany, they went back to, if you were as much as a quarter Jewish, that was Jewish enough.
Was your friend Jeff and Heidi's husband, was he ever identified?
Yes, he was. I had a conversation with Heidi sometime after the memorial service in 2001, considering where Jeff worked and how close he must have been to the impact. I told her not to hold out any hope that we would ever find anything. And personally, in my heart of hearts, I never believed that we would find anything. And then in March, we made an identification of a leg bone that was found on the roof of a building about a block and a half away from the first tower. That bone was identified by DNA, and that's what we buried.
Your life has moved forward. How do you, kind of think about these spiritual issues now?
I have to admit that I got a lot less angry when my daughter was born. It's hard. I am still very angry that this wonderful person was taken away from us. I mean, he was everyone's best friend, and he was the nicest person I have ever met.
In the immediate aftermath of 9/11, I was fond of saying that they killed some of us and brought out the best in the rest of us. And that was my experience. The people that I worked with came from all over the United States, and the families that I interacted with and tried to help came from every walk of life. And I was hugged by Presbyterians and Muslims and Episcopalians and Jews, and nobody that I interacted with from the families. Not from Japan and Australia and from Great Britain and from Canada and from all across the United States of America. Nobody ever said to me, oh, you're Jewish, or I don't want you to help me, or I'm not going to work alongside you.
When I converted, they asked me the one thing about Judaism that I wanted to teach my children. And it was the idea of tikkun olam, to heal the world. And I like that aspect of to leave the world in a better place than when you found it.
Is this the first time you've been to the grave of your parents?
No, unfortunately, since other relatives are here, I've been out here a couple of times, and it does kind of make you